In recent conversations about the Christian theological tradition of marriage, one of the most frequently asked questions has been about polygamy. Doesn't the Old Testament legislate plural marriages, marriage to more than one spouse? Well, it's true that the Old Testament narrative tells us that there were many men who had more than one wife, but it is not true that that narrative informs the Christian tradition of marriage. In fact, the Christian tradition of marriage is informed by the words of Jesus. And in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus said, "For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." Jesus establishes marriage in the creative act of God, in which God created humans, male and female, in God's image and in God's likeness, and blessed them and commanded them to be fruitful and multiply. God's intent in creation is that marriage is one man and one woman for the duration of their lives. And just as Jesus said, "What God has put together, let no man separate," we should also say, "What God established in creation, let no one redefine." Jesus' teaching is difficult for many of us today, but it was just as difficult for those in Jesus' day. One of his opponents asked, "If what you're saying is true, then why does the law of Moses allow for a certificate of divorce?" And Jesus responded, "Moses allowed for divorce because of the hardness of the human heart." Jesus tells us that the hardness of the human heart violates the marriage covenant. The hardness of heart is expressed in adultery. The Apostle Paul tells us that the hardness of the human heart can be expressed in abandonment. The fallen nature of humanity, the hardness of heart, corrupts God's purpose in creation. Any expression of human love beyond what God established in creation is an expression of the fall, and that includes polygamy and same-sex marriage. The Apostle Paul warned us that difficult days would come, and difficult days come because humans tend to be lovers of self and lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. The Christian response in these difficult days should be to open our hearts to the love of God, to commit ourselves to God's purpose in marriage, to teach our children God's purpose in marriage, and remain single-heartedly devoted to our spouses.